didn't become strong by accident. The traits that keep you standing today were forged long before you had words for them. What if the hardest parts of your childhood were never meant to break you, but to build you? Most people spend their lives trying to escape their past without realizing it already shaped their power. This video reveals 5 signs your childhood shaped your current strength through the lens of Carl Jung's psychology in a way few ever explain. Not as victimhood, but as hidden training. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, and you finally understand why you are the way you are and how to use it consciously instead of letting it run you. If you've ever felt different, deeper, more resilient than others, this isn't coincidence. There's a reason your mind works the way it does. And by the end of this, that reason becomes clear. You learned early that pain doesn't always arrive to destroy. Sometimes it shows up to sculpt. What felt like a childhood wound often became the first gym where your inner strength was trained. Back then, it didn't look heroic. It looked confusing, unfair, even lonely. Yet that pressure forged resilience the same way fire tempers steel. Childhood wounds have a strange way of planting seeds of psychological growth, even when the soil feels hostile. Carl Jung once hinted that the greatest gold is buried in the darkest places, and this is where that truth quietly begins. Your mind adapted before it understood, and long before self-awareness showed up, survival was already teaching you its lessons. What hurt you didn't just leave scars. It installed systems, and those systems, unseen, still run the show today. Think of it this way: while other kids were riding on smooth roads, you were learning to ride a bike on gravel. You fell more sure, but you learned balance faster. That's how inner strength develops. Trauma wisdom isn't loud or dramatic, it's subtle, baked into reflexes. When life throws uncertainty your way now, you don't freeze, you adjust. That adaptability didn't come from comfort, it came from friction. Emotional intelligence often starts as damage control, reading moods, scanning rooms, anticipating storms. What looks like intuition in adulthood was once a survival skill in childhood. And here's the twist: the very thing that once kept you safe is now what helps you thrive. There's a reason resilient people don't always talk about their past, not because it didn't matter, but because they've metabolized it. You don't romanticize trauma, yet you don't deny it either. Carl Jung spoke about becoming conscious of what was once unconscious, and that's exactly what's happening here. The wound becomes a teacher once it's understood. A practical step is noticing patterns. Pay attention to moments when you stay calm under pressure or think clearly in chaos. Those aren't accidents. Journaling helps, especially prompts like "When did I learn this?" or "What situation trained me for this moment?" Books like "Man and His Symbols" or "The Body Keeps the Score" deepen that self-awareness, turning confusion into clarity. This is where personal transformation sneaks in. Once you realize your strength has roots, not randomness, shame loosens its grip. Childhood wounds stop being labels and start becoming blueprints. You might notice your discipline came from instability, or your empathy from emotional neglect. That recognition builds self-respect. It reframes the past without excusing it. And that shift alone changes how you show up at work, in relationships, in decisions that matter. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" you start asking, "What did this prepare me for?" That question quietly rewires identity, but there's still a low hum underneath it all. Because if the wound created strength, what else did it create? What habits, defenses, or controls formed alongside resilience? This is where shadow integration starts whispering. Strength without awareness can harden into armor, and armor, while protective, can also block connection. The story doesn't end with power, it deepens with understanding. And just ahead is the next layer: How early responsibility reshaped you before you ever had a choice. You didn't grow up fast because you wanted to. You grew up fast because life handed you responsibilities your nervous system wasn't ready for. While others learned through trial and error, you learned through consequences. This kind of early responsibility doesn't announce itself. It settles into your bones. It teaches discipline without permission and maturity without ceremony. Childhood wounds often disguise themselves as competence, and people praise the results without seeing the cost. Psychological growth here didn't begin with curiosity, but with necessity. Carl Jung understood this when he spoke about adaptation as the psyche's first language. Before you knew who you were, you knew what had to be done. Picture yourself as the stable one in an unstable environment. Someone had to stay calm, someone had to hold it together, someone had to think ahead. So you did. That's how inner strength takes shape, quietly, through repetition. Over time, responsibility becomes identity. You become dependable, reliable, almost unshakable. But underneath that strength lives a younger version of you, who never had the luxury of being careless. Trauma wisdom lives here. Competence built under pressure feels like a badge, but it was forged in urgency. Emotional intelligence grew because mistakes didn't feel safe. And now, as an adult, people trust you instinctively, sensing that grounded presence without knowing where it came from. This silent maturity shows up everywhere. At work, you anticipate problems before they explode. In relationships, you're the emotional anchor, the one who listens, stabilizes, absorbs. Self-awareness begins when you notice this pattern and ask whether you're choosing responsibility or defaulting to it. A simple practice helps. Before saying yes, pause and ask, is this mine to carry? That one question can soften years of automatic overfunctioning. Reading, The Drama of the Gifted Child, by Alice Miller, often opens eyes to how early responsibility shapes adulthood. Here's the paradox. Early responsibility creates capable adults, but it can steal ease. You know how to manage life, yet struggle to enjoy it. You can lead teams, families, crises, yet feel oddly uncomfortable receiving care. Carl Jung would call this an imbalance between persona and inner child. The strong exterior works flawlessly, while softer needs stay unspoken. Personal transformation begins when you loosen the grip just a little, not abandoning responsibility, but redefining it. Strength doesn't disappear when control softens, it evolves. And this is where the story leans forward, because carrying responsibility early didn't just shape behavior, it shaped perception. It trained you to scan, predict, prepare. That alertness didn't fade with time, it sharpened. What began as vigilance slowly turned into something else, an almost uncanny awareness of people, moods, and shifts in energy. There were moments when you needed to be seen and no one noticed, not because people were cruel, but because they were distracted, overwhelmed, unavailable in ways a child can't explain. Emotional loneliness doesn't always mean being alone. It means being unseen. So you learned to sit with your feelings without an audience. That's where inner strength quietly Childhood wounds carved out an inner world rich with reflection, imagination, and self-dialogue. Psychological growth here didn't come from guidance, but from observation. Carl Jung believed the psyche compensates for what's missing. And when emotional mirroring is absent, the mind turns inward to survive. Over time, that inner world became spacious. While others processed emotions out loud, you processed them internally. Emotional intelligence grew in silence. You learned to name feelings without help, to soothe yourself when comfort didn't arrive. Trauma wisdom shows up as depth, the ability to sit with complexity without panic. That's why shallow conversations feel exhausting now. You're not antisocial, you're tuned to meaning. Inner depth was born from necessity, not preference, and it allows you to connect profoundly when real connection finally appears. This kind of loneliness sharpens perception. When you're not emotionally held, you become emotionally observant. You learn to read subtle cues, tone shifts, body language, pauses. Hyper-awareness began as protection and matured into self-awareness. Intentional expression helps balance this. Writing letters you never send, journaling emotions you usually intellectualize. Books like Emotional Intelligence or Man's Search for Meaning resonate because they speak the language of depth, not noise. The hidden gift is this: emotional loneliness creates people who understand others without explanation. You don't rush solutions, you offer presence. That's rare. Personal transformation happens when you realize your depth isn't heaviness, it's capacity. The world needs people who can hold emotional space without collapsing. Still, there's a risk of mistaking depth for isolation. Growth now means inviting others in selectively, safely. And beneath that depth, another layer has been forming. Because when emotions are processed internally, attention sharpens outward. Awareness expands. You don't just feel deeply, you notice everything. You learned early that safety wasn't guaranteed, so attention became armor. Hyper-awareness didn't start as insight. It started as vigilance. You watched faces, tracked tones, noticed energy shifts before words. Childhood wounds trained your nervous system to stay one step ahead. Psychological growth here wasn't optional. It was adaptive. Carl Jung would say the psyche builds tools long before the ego understands why. What looks like intuition now was once survival. Over time, scanning sharpened into the ability to read rooms and anticipate outcomes with eerie accuracy. This awareness makes you appear calm, even detached, but inside there's always information moving. Emotional intelligence thrives here. You know when to speak and when silence carries weight. Trauma wisdom lives in the pause before reaction. Others call you perceptive without realizing the pressure that forged it. Like learning to drive in heavy traffic from day one, your reflexes developed early. Now this hyper-awareness can be a gift in leadership, negotiation, relationships, if consciously directed. The challenge is that what once kept you safe can keep you tense. Hyper-awareness doesn't always shut off. Self-awareness becomes essential. Grounding helps. Slow walks, breathwork, noticing physical sensations. Books like Waking the Tiger explain how vigilance lives in the body. Awareness doesn't lose power when it rests. It clarifies. When integrated, sensitivity becomes discernment. You stop absorbing every emotional shift and start choosing what deserves attention. Personal transformation happens when awareness shifts from defense to wisdom. You stop asking, what's about to go wrong, and start asking, what actually matters. Calm becomes a choice, not just a reflex. Alongside this vigilance, something else formed: silence. Because when you're always observing, you're often not expressing. You didn't learn strength by being heard. You learned it by enduring quietly. When expressing pain didn't feel safe or useful, silence became strategy. Childhood wounds taught you that restraint was sometimes the smartest move, so you adapted. You learned to regulate internally and keep moving without applause. Psychological growth here is invisible from the outside, but systems formed inside. Carl Jung understood that what remains unspoken shapes the unconscious. Silence didn't erase pain. It trained you to carry it with composure. Over time, silence turned into steadiness. While others reacted outwardly, you processed inwardly. Inner strength matured through containment. Trauma wisdom sounds like calm in chaos. You became the one who doesn't panic, who holds the line. Emotional intelligence grew through observation, not discussion. Like a deep river, quiet on the surface and powerful underneath. That's how your presence feels now. But silence cuts both ways. What helps you survive can limit how deeply you're known. Self-awareness grows when you notice how quickly you minimize your own discomfort. Intentional articulation helps. Simple honesty, naming impact without drama. Writing 1 page a day about unspoken reactions can release
Books like
pressure. Radical acceptance, bridge strength with gentleness. When silence becomes choice, not reflex, strength refines. You don't need to disappear to remain strong. Calm becomes magnetic, not distant. People feel safe with you because when you speak, your words land. Still, something formed alongside this resilience, independence. When no one responded, you learned not to ask. You didn't wake up deciding to be independent. Independence grew like calluses, slowly, through
Each time
friction.
help
Didn't come, something adjusted. Childhood wounds taught you not to rely on rescue, so you stopped waiting. Psychological growth here was pragmatic. Carl Jung spoke about individuation, and for you it began early. You learned to stand alone before understanding togetherness. From the outside, this independence looks impressive. You're decisive, capable, self-sufficient. Inner strength hums beneath your actions. Trauma wisdom shaped the mindset. If you don't do it, it won't get done. Emotional intelligence developed because you managed tasks and emotions internally. Like learning to swim by being thrown in, you mastered movement. But the water never fully warmed. Self-awareness grows when you notice how hard it is to ask for help. Low-stakes reliance helps, letting someone handle something small, accepting support without explaining. Books like Attached or No More, Nice Guy shed light on how independence can mask old disappointment. The subtle cost is distance. You don't cling, but you don't lean easily either. Personal transformation begins when you separate capability from isolation. Strength doesn't require solitude. Carl Jung warned that over-identification with the self blocks relationship. True individuation includes connection, and beneath independence lies something more: control. When life felt unpredictable, you learned to create order. Control didn't come from arrogance. It came from necessity. Childhood wounds taught you chaos has consequences, so structure became safety. Psychological growth here was strategic. Carl Jung knew the psyche compensates for instability with order. What began as self-protection became a personal operating system. Control shows up as planning, discipline, foresight. Inner strength lives in your composure. Trauma wisdom shaped your relationship with outcomes. You like knowing what's coming, reducing surprises. Like building a lighthouse after a storm, not to dominate the sea, but to navigate it. Self-awareness matters when control limits flexibility. Experimenting with uncertainty helps, leaving a day open, letting someone else decide. Reading, the courage to be disliked, loosens the grip without abandoning responsibility. Conscious control becomes guidance, not rigidity. Personal transformation happens when you realize control doesn't prevent pain, it postpones it. Stability comes from adaptability. Carl Jung would say the goal isn't control, but conscious relationship with life. Beneath order, something softer formed: empathy. You didn't learn empathy from theory. You learned it by feeling pain without shortcuts. Childhood wounds taught you how suffering moves, quietly, invisibly. Carl Jung believed the wounded healer understands through resonance. Inner strength deepened because you know what dismissal feels like. Your empathy isn't performative. You don't rush to fix. Emotional intelligence shows up as presence. Trauma wisdom teaches that pain doesn't need solving to be honored. People feel safe opening up to you, often without knowing why. Self-awareness grows when you notice how easily you carry others' weight. Boundaries help. Walking after deep talks, writing what's yours and what's not. Books like The Art of Empathy refine the skill without dulling it. Personal transformation happens when you realize compassion is earned, not accidental. Carl Jung believed suffering enlarges the soul when integrated. With boundaries, Empathy becomes sustainable. Even this empathy was shaped by something else, surviving without recognition. You learned early not to wait for applause, not because you didn't deserve it, but because it rarely Childhood came. Wounds taught you survival doesn't always earn praise, so you stopped performing and focused on endurance. Psychological growth became internal. Carl Jung understood that absent validation forces the ego inward. Inner strength formed quietly, without witnesses. This strength doesn't announce itself. You don't need to prove resilience. Trauma wisdom shaped your relationship with success. Results matter more than recognition. Like a tree growing unseen, your roots deepened. Self-awareness expands when you notice how little validation you need. Self-recognition helps, tracking wins privately, setting internal standards. Books like Mastery resonate deeply here. Personal transformation comes with freedom. Freedom from comparison, from performance. Carl Jung warned that living through others' expectations fragments the self. Detaching from applause gave you authorship over your life. Now, the responsibility shifts to you. Awareness without action is just information. Awareness applied becomes transformation. If you recognize yourself here, the question isn't, why am I like this? It's, what will I do with this strength now? Look at your habits, your relationships, how you handle pressure. Where are you using trauma wisdom wisely? And where is it running unchecked? What would change if you softened control, asked for support, trusted your worth beyond endurance? Growth doesn't erase the past. It upgrades your relationship with it. Take a moment, write one insight that hit you and one action you'll apply this week. And if this helped you see yourself more clearly, imagine what consistent reflection could do. Subscribe to Mind's Silent Echo and turn on notifications. This channel exists to help you understand your mind, integrate your past, and turn silent strength into conscious power.